Hey, everybody, welcome back to Dandelion Spirit, the podcast that looks at ideas of resilience through trauma. I'm your host, Donna, along with my older sister, Jules. And this week's
Hello.
episode, we're going to talk about psychological abuse, not just the physical, and how it's used as a weapon. And just PSA, like we always do, sometimes our podcast can be a bit graphic and a bit triggering, so listener beware. Um, we have touched on things about how personality develops from trauma as a very young child, how physical abuse affects people differently, how trauma is looked at differently. But what we didn't talk about yet was the psychological abuse that's often committed against someone, actually in tandem many times with physical abuse, as a weapon against children and women, and how the psychological abuse can really, really mentally screw you up for a long time because it gets rooted in doubt. I think the biggest disruptor is it creates a lot of self-doubt in the victim. But the other big thing about psychological abuse is it goes unnoticed, right? Kind of a hard thing to just automatically understand or see in a victim, or read about in a police report or whatever it is. You hear stories, for example, like in the emergency room in the hospital, you didn't notice any bruising, but the kid seemed off. Or, the wife continues to go back and back and back. She keeps going back to the abusive husband and she won't leave him. And why not? And you're just really stumped as to why someone would continue to go back to an abuser or continue to take so much physical abuse. We expect people to get counseling immediately, for example, after a traumatic event. But how? Even some real live TV or some podcasts or even fictional TV will have the nurse, when they're discharging someone, you should go talk to someone about this. This is traumatic. But that's it. It's almost like it's part of the script sometimes now, even in fiction, and yet they don't expand on it. What do you mean by help? Where do I go for help? What do you mean I'm going to feel some sort of way? I'm leaving now. I thought I'm fine. What's going to happen? So it's kind of not really dealt with still after decades and decades and decades of understanding now and accepting that there's serious domestic abuse, survivor abuse, that they're trying to deal with, like survivor's guilt. Even getting out of a cult, we understand slowly but surely now, we understand there's a deprogramming people have to go through because it's psychological. So, welcome to psychological abuse. I mean, it's a very, very powerful tool to keep the abuser in power over the victim, and for the victim to learn things like how to comply, how to give in, how to obey. Maybe it's meant to keep the physical away. Like if I just obey and kind of go with or be quiet or comply, no more physical will happen or no more SA will happen or whatever. It's hard to know unless you're a victim. So hopefully, we don't get a ton of books of people writing about how they were victims and what they thought. The types of phrasing that the abuser will use, the types of communication an abuser can use, very much affect how a person will react to violence against them. So, in order to keep a kidnapped victim compliant, the abuser may repeatedly say over hours or days or weeks or whatever, well, I'm going to let you go. Don't worry. I'm going to let you go. So you as the victim might kind of still think, okay, kind of play along or play nice a little bit. And that's I would say that would be a pretty normal human reaction to something like that. Let's say you have a sex abuser who tells, their 8-year-old nephew, so I'll kill your parents if you say anything. This is our secret. So now that 8-year-old doesn't really know, right? What do you know at 8? Okay, I guess I'll keep it secret, or he's going to kill my parents. He can't kill my parents. Um, the priest who may tell the 12-year-old, this is the will of God. You know, we need to cleanse you of your sins. How many times have we heard that in a police report or on the news over the last few decades? It sounds easy to ignore. It sounds, coming from an adult perspective, why would you ever believe that? Or why would you listen? Goes back to the abused wife, right? Why would you go back? Or why would you think he would do that? Because at this point in the abuse, you don't know what could happen. You don't know. I mean, you ever leave me, I'll kill you. Maybe it takes 20 years, but then next time you turn on the news, she's dead. You don't know. That's, I think, one of the hardest parts about the psychological abuse. The victim really doesn't know which way things may go. They're not in charge. It's a difficult thing to navigate. It has proven to be extremely difficult to understand and assess abuse. And even though the physical can easily be detected, the mind part is one that's missing. Psychological abuse, we know, or we've understood more recently, traps the victim, right? It's a systematic thing. They're systematically dismantling their sense of reality, their sense of self, their sense of self-worth, their independence, rather than using just physical barriers. So if I want to control the wife, I'm going to make sure that she doesn't have any access to money. She can't leave. She can't freely do what she wants during the day. She can't spend on whatever she wants. So there's
Right.
no way.
Forced isolation.
Right.
That's the
Forced.
term they use for traditional wives that don't have a vehicle that could leave, that don't really partake in the financial aspects of the home. It's called forced isolation.
Yeah. And financial dependence on top of that.
Well, yeah,
Right.
that's embedded in that. I tell people it's non-physical behaviors, but the behaviors are designed to manipulate or frighten or isolate or degrade, and it it's a pattern, so it's consistent. It's over and over and over and over, similar to some aspects of our childhood. We had consistent psychological or what they call verbal abuse, that was consistent throughout my childhood. And, you kind of lean into it as a kid and, okay, they must be right. Or you pull back as a kid and be like, what? Or, I mean, everyone has different personalities, but again, it's the whole thing of that is our parents were overly controlling and had all of those things going on for us. You know, the we were afraid, we were degraded, we were isolated, the same type of patterns that, a husband would do with a wife.
Right. It's like you hear it enough, you start to believe it. Or if you're only told about the bad, you start to accept it. Or, and I don't think this is necessarily an age thing. You can be a pretty confident, outgoing 20-year-old, you get kidnapped, but over a series of weeks, your abuser starts to pound into you, verbally, this, that, and the other that's negative and degrading.
I
You
don't even
start,
think you would have to be kidnapped. I would think you could meet a charming man on campus and you're in your first year at college and he's very sweet and da 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 and slowly over time you realize you've adjusted things to make him happy. Maybe he likes your hair shorter or he compliments this type of dress or and you're not even aware that it's manipulation. You aren't even aware of the patterns, especially if you're young and vulnerable to that. You don't have a good, um, should I say, strong support system or other older women around you. I would need, and after a while, before you know it, those things just seem, well, he doesn't like that. He gets upset. Oh, okay. That's just, and other women would be like, what do you mean he doesn't like that? He gets upset. What is that?
right,
You're not here to please him. And it would be like, what?
right,
So I think it would depend, I think it could happen to the average person that meets somebody that has those tendencies. You don't find out till after. You don't really meet someone and go, oh, they're a narcissist right away. Often they're love bombing you, or they're treating you a certain way that you're like, oh, you kind of, and fall into that, I don't want to say trap, but into that pattern. And then you have to struggle to get yourself out of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And you don't know how to get out of it too. That becomes a whole other side of it.
Right.
You have all these ideas and expectations from family and society, and well, we don't believe in divorce in my religion, and I'm with this guy now, and what the heck? And that, I mean, it's not just understanding that you probably need to leave or change, but it's how. There's not a single person in the last 100 years, priest, psychologist, who would have told you how to leave the abusive husband. You might have a therapist who might bring it up, maybe nowadays, but you don't know. If, especially like you said, if you're a little younger, you kind of fall into it. Next thing you know, 5, 6 years have gone by, 10 years, or you have children and you're really stuck, or you move far away from your support system and you're
or your
like,
support system your support system, sorry to cut in, tells you, try to make it work. You have a child together. Oh, men are like that. Or, your father has his thing with this or that. Or they try to kind of downplay. I mean, at least where we were coming from, being older, I mean, that patriarchal stuff was very much in place. If you weren't going to
yeah,
be a wife to him, you were going to be a wife to somebody else.
right,
It was kind of like a non, I mean, there wasn't a lot of options presented, and it was just kind of like, you have to make this work. You have to compromise, and you're raised up with that. So a lot of women, if they're raised that way, especially if they're very religious as well, you're there to serve your husband. You're there to, and so some of those aspects that are in that relationship are already abusive, and
right.
they don't even recognize it because it's kind of been spoon fed to them that, this is kind of how it is. And, you can do this and you can, and it's like, it's when they get older, often they kind of look back and you're like, oh, well, gosh, that didn't
Yeah,
really serve me very well. Now what, or they're not really part of a partnership. I was just here to have his kids, or, this or that, or, a
fill a
multitude of
quota,
other things.
fill a
Right.
quota. But it kind of goes the same for kids. Like when we were younger, I want to see you, not hear you, kind of a thing. So that kind of social expectation was drilled into you, whether you're my child or not. People could, use that psyche against you by saying, I'm going to tell your parents, you better quit doing that. Um, the be seen and not heard thing went all the way to, don't lie about school, don't tell me about, I don't know how to explain, maybe like if you couldn't just tell your parents things. It wasn't really like that. You had to have the most down to earth loving parents, I think, because they just weren't having it, at least not our
Well, we
parents
didn't
for
have
sure.
those parents, so when
No.
my friends would say, "Well, I talked to my mom," I was like, "Well, that's nice." Uh, my mom talks to me, gives me chore lists, and tells me I'm stupid, and I'm like, "We don't have those conversations." Yeah, but what about when you started your period? I had my period for 2 years before my mom had any clue, and I said she didn't want to deal with it. When my
Shouldn't care.
sister started her period, she sent her to me. And I was like, what am I supposed to tell you? Like, here's the things I figured out. Like, I mean, and a lot of it was trial and error for, people would have me pads, and people would have me different types of tampons, and people would give me this advice and that. And most of them were kids at school. I did have
Yeah.
one PE teacher my freshman year that's like, if you stay warm, your cramps won't be as bad, and kind of gave me some actual motherly type advice. But for the most part, I was out there reading, trying to figure it out, asking my friends, or, we didn't have that parent you could go to and even say, well, I had a really bad day, I fought with my friend. They could have cared less. Matter of fact,
No.
taking up their time was not okay.
That's against the law. Um,
Yeah.
but it makes me think of the idea that women are trained to be uncomfortable and dismissed. Um, well, you're going to have to just deal with it, kind of thing. A lot like the marriage thing. Even mom was kind of like that with us a little bit. Oh, God, what'd you do? I didn't do anything. Wait a minute. Why didn't he do something? Maybe we both did something. That's why we're divorcing. Or what do you mean, me? Why is it only me? Like, why should I have to put up with it or whatever? And
But
as a
yet all of her
child,
children are divorced.
yeah, every single one of them. But yet, as
Yeah.
children, it's the same kind of thing. It's almost like mom and dad expected us to be uncomfortable, in pain. I don't care. Just, just kind of go about your day, whatever, do your chores, and maybe I'll feed you, and then we'll go to bed and do it all over again. Like she did not want to know about your struggle as, my best friend in second grade is not my best friend anymore versus, holy shit,
Your
I started
dreams
my
or
period.
aspirations, what you liked, nothing.
Nothing. You get in a
No.
fight at school and she's like, what'd you do? Well, why do you think automatically assume it was me and not the five other girls who jumped me or
I used
whatever?
to tell my coworker, they'd be like, "You're gonna fight me in a dress?" I'll be like, "Yeah, I have to wear this dress. I'm gonna take that out on you too." Like, because I was the tomboy supposedly, and she just could not deal with me being athletic or wanting to play. I don't know. I never saw myself as a tomboy. I saw myself as having fun, riding bikes, doing whatever. But forcing me to wear those dresses, I just decided, fine, I'll do it in a dress, and I
she
did.
did she did the same thing to me. I'm like, great, okay. So I had to deal with the pants down Tuesday where the boys tried to pull your underpants down. You're wearing a skirt, you're wearing a
Oh, they
dress.
still do that. Flip up Friday.
Flip up
Difference is I
Friday.
punch boys in the face. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm a little more aggressive when I'm uncomfortable or fearful. The more fearful you make me, the more I'll probably be in your face.
yeah,
If I feel you're no threat to me, I'm very calm. But, and if you step up to me, it's just that's just my natural,
yeah,
characteristic behavior. I don't know. And other people step back, other people get quiet, and I'm not dumb. I'm not going to go into a situation that obviously, but part of that is I feel like I've pushed back so much when I was a kid that I almost have a permanent forward lean
right,
into things. Because I was told, no, 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 maybe, no, yeah, no, 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 and it's like, what? And just to voice your opinion, you had to be, I mean, that was part of their psychological. We weren't allowed to have an opinion. We weren't allowed to be part of a bigger conversation. They would sit us down and be like, "We're moving. Get rid of your stuff. It doesn't fit on it's probably not going to fit. We're going to have a yard sale and we're going." And we had no choice in anything ever. We didn't choose our own clothes. We couldn't listen to our own music. We moved wherever they wanted us to move to. So in a sense, it's like, if you think about it, it's like pre-training, in a way for those people like the Gen X that grew up. Yeah, we grew up kind of feral outside, but at the same time, those were the expectations. Was
right,
almost a 50s style
yeah,
kind of thing, which would begun to kind of break apart towards the end of the 60s, and things shifted
right,
around in the 70s. And so we had more opportunities in a sense, but they were still, I feel like we're back there again with this current administration, and a lot of people, they want a traditional wife, and but it's not the same economy, it's not the same time frame, it's not the same.
yeah.
It's like going backwards. And then
Literally,
again, if you're a trad wife, you don't have rights. It seems like you're, like you said, out of the financial loop, out of the decision making, out of all of those things. It places you right back in a patriarchal, misogynistic. Just there you go.
right.
It's ultimately about control.
Yeah, and no way to figure out how to get out of it, who to tell, what to do about it. It's the
Right.
same old, same old. Um, I mean, when I worked as a police officer in the military, it was kind of like, well, you can have a shelter for a night, one night, and that's about all I could offer them. I couldn't offer them psych services, or there were no resources for outreach for
Well,
children.
that has
I'm like,
changed, thankfully.
Little bit, yes.
At
Better, I would
school, it's
say.
changed. At school, they're much more aware of what they call SEL, which is social emotional learning, and actually work with teachers to try to understand that a little better because that wasn't, we didn't care if your dog died or your grandma died, you sit down and do the math. And,
Right.
kids weren't allowed to take breaks, kids weren't, taught regulation, breathe, nothing, and that's changed in the schools in a sense that there's more awareness of that. I can pull a kid out and take him on a walk, let him calm down and put him back in the classroom, or I
Yeah.
can give a kid a little break or whatever. But before that was like, what are you talking about? You know?
Well, I think of our parents, like every time we moved, I was molested, usually by a teacher. And I vividly remember I can't tell them. It didn't even matter that we would move and I'd never have to see that teacher again, which is relief in a way you would think, right? But I remember there's no way in hell I'm telling my parents. Because of the way mom was always very, very degrading about your worth and very much anything bad that ever happens to you is fucking your fault. And she was always, oh my God, especially after you were gone, she was 20 times harder on me about stupid
Yeah.
shit like,
Well, when I was there, I was responsible for you and, well, for my siblings.
right.
And there's times that I wasn't with the siblings and I would be in trouble.
Yeah.
The classic cases when you broke your jaw. I mean, I got jerked up in the middle of the hospital and, laid in, and I was like, I wasn't with them. And then it was like, why weren't you? What do you, what? Like, kids playing with their, like, it was a completely normal, it was an accident. I mean, they do happen. And you guys were riding bikes and I don't remember what I was doing, but I was doing so, like,
Yeah.
yeah, but I was always responsible for, and I always thought that was odd how I was just the mini parent immediately, you
Yeah.
know, and just responsible for, like I don't control my brother. Well, you're responsible for well, really? Like, don't listen to me. But
Which is, that's really abusive, right? Like, I'm
right,
thinking to myself, I guess I can talk to my brother and sister. That's all I have. But at the same time, are they going to get in trouble too? Like, I mean, the navigation we had to go through. When I think back now of the psychological and verbal abuse from mom, I'm like, holy fuck. Like, I felt like I couldn't even go to you guys. You know what I mean? And you're my brother's brother and sister. So there's a
right,
real disconnect between helping or being available to help and understanding that you can go find help.
right. And I think
And
moving us out of that familiar territory, which is where they were allowed to grow up, we would have had layers of aunts and uncles, cousins, people we grew up with if we would have stayed, where
yeah,
maybe like you get a best friend, and that was all taken away from us as well. So, and
yep,
then to move, and every year you're moving. So again, it's brand new people. And there's no way you're going to go up to a brand new person and be like, hey, da 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 da's going on. Because,
no,
we got beat for doing nothing. So, I mean, can you imagine telling on something and it's no way. It's like I tell
no,
people, like when I was a teenager, oh, you're afraid. You met my dad? You want to go deal with my dad? Yeah, no way, man. Yeah, I'm out. Like, not worth it. If it's worth it, possibly. Peter
yeah,
Frampton was worth it. I said I stayed the night and snuck out and went to a concert. Okay, but that's not like I didn't get caught. They're like, why? I go, my dad would have beat the shit out of me. Like, getting caught was a whole nother thing. But we overall didn't really do anything bad. We were just basic kids. For
I
whatever
think,
reason, they seem to be hyper vigilant or overly monitoring, which is again part of psychological abuse. You know, why they had to control, why couldn't we just be kids and listen to the new music and go stay the night over here? But we were continually funneled into what they wanted or their expectations.
right. And I think moving all the time almost falls into one of those things we were talking about. What's done to the victim? Isolation.
Yeah,
So if I think
absolutely.
you are getting too close to someone and oh my God, you're
Absolutely.
going to be pregnant at 9, so we're moving again. They didn't think that way, but it almost felt that way because we were isolated. You can't take your friends with you. You're not near other family. You can't, it almost felt like isolation, moving all the time. You felt like you're in this weird bubble and you didn't know how long it would last and you didn't know where you were going to end up. So, very, very frustrating. I know a few other points that are pretty big with how a psychological abuse is committed on victims. Gaslighting, that's a big one. I'm learning. We know what it is. We experience it. Okay, so some of the psychological things that the abuser will do. We're going to list a few and talk about some of them. We touched briefly on isolation. Keep you kind of isolated, keep you at home. My ex-husband would go to work in another country and take the car keys with him. Forced isolation, right? I mean,
Right.
we understand that kind of stuff.
Support and yep. Oh,
Exactly. I couldn't even go
gaslighting.
anywhere for support or family or functions. Gaslighting is a big one, of course. I mean, people who are manipulative in general, I think, gaslight a lot.
True. Because it's you and they end up twisting events to where and denying reality, and you're like, wait a minute, did I? You kind of doubt yourself, and then the love bombing's the other side of it. You go through. I was my second marriage. You go through all this stuff, and then the love bombing, and you're like, oh, are we better? Like we're good, but really it's not. So
Well, the trauma bonding on the list, I kind of likened it to, well, you've got the honeymoon period. Okay, everything's good and you love them and everything's nice. And then emotionally, you're pulled back into the physical. And so when people ask you, you're like, no, but he apologized and we're okay and we're better now
oh well,
for a
yeah.
little
He
bit.
said he'd never do it again.
Exactly.
For
And
me,
we,
it was I had one type of person in the beginning of my marriage, and later I had a different person. And yeah, so no, that was no thank you.
right. Another one. An- Another one that came up was perspecticide, a profound form of psychological control where victim loses the capacity to know what they think or feel. It, like I said, it's like planting that seed of doubt in your worth and in your reality, and you know your perspective is kind of sabotaged. And I think that is true. Like I remember that, like I was saying earlier about being a kid, and initially we're moving again, this is kind of cool, new friends, new place, but then it's technically a little bit more like being isolated, right? Every time we moved, you weren't there long enough. It was a way to isolate us and keep us within their shit and their abuse
In a
and
little
their,
bubble.
right, that's
Yeah.
exactly horrible, but that's it did alter my perspective as when I was younger. But by the time I'm probably 11 or 12, I'm thinking, just get into sports, make friends on day one. I, you know, it's not going to be
Yeah,
better.
where I was like, let's fight the kids that are making fun of my little brother and then move on. I mean,
That happens so often. I'm sorry.
yes. But once I fought the boys, they would leave him alone. Usually he became friends with them. Usually I became friends with them. Boys are wired differently. I don't care what anybody says. I believe that. Girls can be catty and bring it back up a year later. Boys, usually it's kind of just, oh, okay, an adjustment of things. And, our brother wasn't necessarily a bad person or unlikable, just that I tell people pick on kids that look different. It just happens because it's in our nature. It's we're supposed to have somebody that's different than us be bad.
Right.
So if you're fat or you're too skinny or this or that. So he was heavy. And, once they got to know him, that was no longer an issue. But when you're the new kid, you're the fat new kid or,
You're
whatever. And so since I kind of hung out with the boys and all that, yeah, it seemed like every time we moved, there was this confrontation about that. And I was like, oh, okay.
yeah,
Like,
for
what?
sure.
Really? Like, you know,
It was weird. I
but
wasn't really his sister either. even though we're only like a grade apart, until we were a little bit older. It was kind of a weird. So then I would make friends with his friends. He would make friends with some of my friends. And then we were a little bit more like a group, and it was a little more fun sometimes and a little bit safer in a way. And I couldn't go anywhere without my brother anyway. Mom was like, "You're going with your brother. You can't go alone." I'm like, "We're supposed to go to the mall and go to a movie. And now I have to go with Steve, who's smoking whatever at the football field before they go to the rec center and play video games and go. I don't want to get, yeah. So, but that was a whole nother thing. But another
Right.
one is
Yeah.
coercive control and fear. I think fear is used a lot in rape and sexual assault.
Been in parenting.
Absolutely. Um, Mom threatened a lot, actually, and it was
But dad enforced it.
the physical was no
We,
joke. Um,
yeah.
like it was, God forbid, we had major skull fracture as a kid or something. I don't know if they would have taken us to hospital. You didn't break your leg, remember? Like, what the fuck? It was scary. Um, if you got hurt, you were more afraid of telling mom or having the nurse call from school or what that you got hurt. Like, I remember being petrified to tell her that I scratched my finger and needed a band-aid or whatever. Like, I remember as a kid, don't go to your mom.
Yep.
Stupid. And then there's, my best friend in Paris, her mom and dad are like parents. Oh, what's wrong, honey? Come here, come here. Let me see, let me see. I'm like, what? See what? I didn't do nothing. I'm fine. I'm okay. Nose isn't bleeding, you
But
know?
also didn't try to hurt you, which I felt our mother did. Our mother always had a way to, it needed to be scrubbed. It needed Mercurochrome. It needed like the way that she treated it was,
Excruciating.
I interrupted her day with a normal kid thing and I was being punished for it. We dealt with stuff on our own.
It was
I mean,
bad.
because yeah,
God forbid you fell
absolutely.
off your skateboard and scraped the fuck out of your knee and there was a bunch of gravel in the road where you fell. Her idea of scrubbing was a nail brush and scrubbing. Fucking shit
Yep.
hurt. I mean, this
Yep.
woman was brutal. But you don't get any pain afterwards. Like a band-aid may have been a waste, so you don't get one of those either. Or, I mean, she was very, it was,
Because also, why are you crying? Why are you upset? Or, man, you're like, because I fell and I hurt myself. Like,
right.
I think back now to like normal responses were treated like, what's wrong with you? Nothing's wrong with me. It hurts.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember I was standing and I got the classroom door closed on my finger and it caught my nail and shoved my nail up. And they basically held my hand down and cut my nail out of my little finger because of the way it had to regrow. And she was like, don't embarrass me by crying. I mean, it was like,
That's mom.
I'm standing there, blood, I'm like, sure. I was like, I want to say maybe third grade. They're, okay, lady. Like, my injuring myself was not to make you upset
Right.
in any way. And they probably wouldn't, I probably would have gone home with it, but I showed my teacher and she passed out and the kids thought I killed her. So they called the office and the kids were like, you killed her. And I was like, and I didn't know it happened. She saw the blood and, but as a kid, I had no idea she would have that reaction or, but so people from the office came and they called and that was part of it too. She was disrupted from her day to deal with something her child had done. And, how stupid was I? And who the fuck puts their hand in the goddamn door and burp, burp, and it was really none of those. It was everybody was standing there. It was an accident.
Yeah.
But it's like in third grade, I did it on purpose. Like I didn't do it on purpose. It's an accident. Like,
I think the,
I just never understood that funny, and isolation is part of the degrading, is part of that isolation. And there's a part of you at sometimes that people like, you want to be friends, and part of me is like, well, A, I'm moving, and probably within a year, but B, I'm supposedly a
Right.
horrible person. So, I mean, I don't know. You'd want to be friends with me, or like, I mean, there's points in time where you're a kid where you're like, geez, okay.
Yeah.
Like,
I remember too, it was really hard to explain things to people. And as I got older and older and older, even now, today, I have a hard time explaining things to people because their perspective can't grasp that image
right,
wise. We looked okay as kids in school, no matter where we
right,
went. We looked put together. We didn't look neglected and malnourished, so to speak. But you can't see the bruises on my ass either, or
right.
you don't know that I didn't get
Can't hear the words that were told to me every day.
right. That was hard, and I even had a therapist I had to get rid of once. But I said, okay, you're saying but to me too much because you're thinking of your standard, familiar. It wasn't like that. I tell people just because others present well doesn't necessarily always mean they're very well, right?
Right,
You know, if I'm severely depressed, that doesn't automatically mean I haven't showered in 2 weeks and I don't give a fuck. But
right,
but classical depression's no, wait a minute. I understand classical depression in this book says this. However, and God forbid if you weren't together before you went to school. Mom would just, oh my God, the way she brushed our hair was brutal and then hit you with the brush if you moved. I'm just like, yeah, we didn't look abused or neglected, but holy fuck, we were. Why did we all try to like run away at some point? Well, you more than once, but like Jesus, it wasn't home, right? And we weren't
right.
from there. So what the hell? Why not just try to leave? I mean, it was just, anyway. We touched on financial dependency, especially back in the day, but even so now, financial dependency is a big one that
Yeah,
particularly men like to use against women, I would say for sure. Um,
right. It's controlling of decision making.
hmm
So I was curious because they had like signs of emotional abuse. So I was curious, and some of it's kind of like your partner swears at you, yells at you, repeatedly bullies you. I'm kind of like, well, okay, I mean, we should be able to figure that out. But then I was like, well, what are these drivers against violence? And it's fundamentally rooted in gender inequality.
Yeah.
And there's four specific drivers: condoning of violence against women, social norms, attitudes, jokes, whatever. Men's control of decision making, which is not only our independence financially, but our autonomy. Rigid gender stereotyping, how men are, sexual delineation,
Yep.
women are submissive and passive, men are aggressive and alpha. And male peer relationships, where it kind of emphasizes aggression or dominance or disrespect towards women, kind of the reinforcing factors of it. And it's our parents do a lot. Looking at it, you're like, oh well, gosh, yeah, and oh, gosh, because we were told you're not good enough to go. You're not going to college. You're going to get married.
Right.
Which is okay. The decision making was completely everything, financial autonomy, whatever. We grew up in a sexually delineated house,
Yeah.
and and other male relationships, we moved a lot, so he would have friends or coworkers or you know but that locker room talk was still kind of a prevalent thing. But at the time we were kids did not really mingle with adults. Now there's a mingling. And I shouldn't say way back then, but back then, the kids did that just like the women were in the kitchen and the men were in the garage kind of. I mean, there still is some separation. Can you help me with the cooking? Yeah, gee, thanks. And the men are over there talking or whatever. But it was more so kids did not get involved in, adult things. But when I was reading through this, I was like, oh, it sounds like a lot of what we went through. I mean, I tell
Yep.
people you hear it all day long, every day. And that's why they're like, you have PTSD. I'm like, chronic, daily for like 17 years, like my whole life.
Yes.
and they just kind of, some of them can't even
I think
comprehend that.
I, I realized why I was getting kind of triggered with the current White House administration. He talks that way. They all condone submissive women. I mean, we had a website about rape where guys could join and locker room talk about how to drug your wife or girlfriend and rape her. This is 2026, and that stereotype and that expectation of men and is still trying so hard to be pushed down our throat. And
Yeah,
the the dependency, like you said, my first husband wouldn't let me get a job. You're supposed to stay home with the kids. I'm like, forever? Like, forever? Like, what do you mean I can't get a job? Not even part time? Get out of the fucking house for a minute? Again,
right.
no
Have your
support,
own money.
no money,
Right,
that's not very long ago. That was only 35 years ago for me. What
right.
the hell? So the abuse will always be there.
But I did the same thing with Trump. I put in like, what has changed? You know, and it said reports indicate that psychological abuse, misogynistic harassment towards women have surged significantly following Donald Trump's political return, both in online spaces and through federal policy changes. This first thing was the "Your Body, My Choice" thing,
Yep.
um, and it was like a crazy peak that went on Twitter, or they call it X now, that they showed within 24 hours of the election. It was just like, wow. The offline impact, the rhetoric had moved into schools and things like that. Get back to the kitchen, your body, my choice, that kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
then they redefined domestic violence, which I wasn't as aware of. Um, they've faced criticism because they narrowed the federal definition of domestic violence, which advocates say directly targets victims of psychological abuse. The exclusion of non-physical harm. The Justice Department's updated definition
Yep.
focuses strictly on physical harm that constitutes a felony or misdemeanor. This effectively removes psychological abuse, coercive control, and manipulation. Minimizing language during public remarks, Trump has characterized domestic disputes as a little fight with the wife, which experts argue trivializes abuse and emboldens perpetrators. I mean, along with funding cuts, immigrant vulnerability, and reproductive coercion. But taking that away, it's funny because when these things come to light, like the Diddy trial and other things, people are like, they had a choice, they had a choice. All these people had choices. I'm like, but did they really? Did she really have a choice? Was there no psychological coercion going? You don't know what was being said, what would get you to the point to participate, what was required, you know. And
What was
I
being
didn't
held over?
realize that Trump had taken away all of that psychological. I wasn't aware of that. It kind of blew my mind. I was just like, what? So
Yeah,
it's only physical.
water all of it down so women are put back in a box like Victorian England,
Yeah,
literally.
yeah,
Everything from covering it
crazy.
all up to taking away any rights you have, voting rights, Roe v. Wade, um, financial
They
pay.
are talking about getting rid of the 19th Amendment.
Yeah. Oh, bad. They're itching. They're itching bad. They, wow. Like,
They
they're,
wanted to, initially, they talked about the household vote. And
yeah,
initially, it's in Project 2025, the husband votes for
for the house.
whomever's allowed to vote. And that didn't really wash. They didn't really get, I think, the feedback they expected. So then they kind of swung the other way and they gutted the Voting Rights Act, which I don't think will work well for them. And then women is the next target because women primarily vote, they say Democratic, but I say human rights often. Not that the Democrats are way better or anything, but I mean, there's obviously two ideologies going on here.
Sure.
Um, and they want to eliminate that. The same with people of color. They primarily often lean Democratic because Democratic is often more progressive and more open to human rights and encompassing. So it's very interesting to me. And people seem to kind of I don't know. I'm shocked at the women that are opposing women, but
Right.
I
I don't know. Maybe we'll see what happens in the midterms. This is going to be interesting how the rest of this plays out because we have a major vote coming. Um,
I
and,
don't think we'll make it to the midterm.
and we'll see. I don't know. But if you or someone you
Yeah.
know is suffering from serious abuse and you're looking for some kind of resources, just remember National Domestic Violence Hotline is available, 1-800-799-SAFE, SAFE. Or you can text START, START, to 88788. This is a 24/7 hour hotline, by the way. There's also RAINN, RAINN, Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, 1-800-656 HOPE, HOPE, 24/7, 365 days a year. Veterans Hotline also has a crisis outreach. There are more resources nowadays than there was. Even if you're not sure, you can just call them and ask questions. It's a great service. So we're going to wrap it up for this week. Stay tuned for our next episode, see what we dive into. And as always, make today your peaceful day.
Protect your spirit.
That's it. Bye for now.